is day 3, week 1, Tuesday, December 1st. Ishtar's Odyssey, a family Advent story. So Ishtar has entered that room where everybody is applauding him and he doesn't know why. Let's find out why. A mission. Ishtar had seen chariots before, but never had he touched one, let alone ridden in one. But here he was standing on the back of the king's own chariot, being pulled by the king's horses and driven by his charioteer through the main streets of Amaranth. In front of him rode 2 columns of palace guards, dressed in red and yellow uniforms, each waving a banner and riding a horse. Walking behind him were 2 columns of priests and nobles, all waving long palm branches, a traditional symbol of goodness. And in front of the whole parade rode trumpeters on horseback. And in another chariot, a town crier. "Behold, how the king treats his most honored servants," the crier shouted to the city. "Ishtar of Amaranth, Prince of Persia, friend of the heavens and blessed by the gods, is this day proclaimed to be a preferred friend and advisor to the king." Ishtar wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. In fact, he thought he was supposed to be in his etiquette lesson right now. So he just stood on the back of the chariot and waved to the cheering crowd in the market. In all the excitement, he'd missed lunch, something that never happened before except when he was sick. But Ishtar felt only confusion right now, not hunger. "Behold how the king treats his most honored servants," the crier repeated. "Ishtar of Amaranth, Prince of Persia, friend of heavens and blessed by the gods, is this day proclaimed to be a preferred friend and advisor to the king." It had only been an hour earlier that the king had stood in the throne room and said those same words about Ishtar. When at last the applause had died down, the king made an announcement. "Our greatest scientists and trusted officials have examined closely. The star announced itself to Ishtar," he said. Ishtar knew his father and uncles were the scientists and the officials the king spoke of, but he had no idea what the last part meant. "They have calculated," the king continued, "that the appearance of the star signals the imminent fulfillment of an ancient prophecy recorded in many books, the birth of a new and mighty king to our Jewish friends to the west." This news caught Ishtar by surprise. How could a single star say such a thing? "I am therefore sending a caravan," the king continued, "to carry gifts to this child and to honor him as a ruler of a friendly nation." At this, a great cheer had gone up in the throne room, and then the king ordered a parade in Ishtar's honor. So now here he was, wondering what in all Persia had just happened to him. He continued to just wave and wave. As the parade neared the edge of the city, they passed the house of Ishtar's cousin, who was playing in the street. At the sound of the trumpets, the cousins looked up and were shocked to see the boy that had played with them just a day before honored in this king's procession. They stared and waved slowly, not believing their sight. Ishtar just waved at them and shrugged his shoulders. The parade turned another corner and headed back toward the palace down the same market street Ishtar had ridden the day before. Everyone stopped and waved. Ishtar saw, but it seemed like they weren't really very excited about it. In fact, he decided it looked like they were waving because they had to. Then he saw the same group of boys from the day before. They were waving too, but under their breath they were chanting, "Mama's boy, Mama's boy, little Mama's boy." Ishtar looked away in anger and he just ignored them. Finally, the parade arrived back at the palace and Kazim led Ishtar back up to his apartment. Varta had a late lunch ready for him and went on and on and on about how beautiful it had all been and how she cried as she heard the people cheering for him. Ishtar didn't bother telling her that those cheers weren't very sincere. So how does it feel to be a special advisor to the king? Ishtar looked up and saw Shalimar entering the room, his royal robes billowing behind him. "Father," he cried, and gave him a huge hug. "What just happened?" Shalimar laughed loudly. "I guess it swept across you like a shamal wind, didn't it?" and almost blew me away, Ishtar answered. Well, my son, it happened like this. They both sat and Ishtar continued his lunch as Salamar spoke. The star you discovered last night has never before appeared in the skies to anyone. Its place in the heavens and the timing of its appearance signal the birth of a new king, as Sheikh Konarak announced. But how? How can a star say such a thing? Salamar shook his head slowly. It is a very complex question and requires many calculations and much research for an answer. Someday you will understand, but for now, it is enough for you to know this. An event which has been prophesied for 1,000 years is about to take place, and your star is going to lead us to that place. But I didn't even do anything, Ishtar argued. All I did was look up to answer Alam's question. Salamar took a deep breath, thinking, Ishtar, he said at last, it is not the fact that you saw the star that makes you special. It is the fact that the star chose you to appear to. Ishtar was still frustrated. But a star cannot choose or not choose, he said. A star is just a light in the sky. A light smile curved up the corner of Salamar's mouth as he said this. Not this star. Ishtar didn't understand as Salamar stood and slapped his son on the back. In any event, he said, it is clear what the star means and clear what I must do. You understand, don't you, that I will be leading the caravan that the king is sending? Ishtar nodded his head sadly. His father had been gone from Amaranth several times during Ishtar's life, leading one expedition after another. Ishtar always hated it. His mother had died giving birth to him, and even though Kazim and Varda were like family, it just wasn't the same. But he understood it was part of his father's duties. This will be the longest journey yet, Salamar said, and will require much preparation. How long? Ishtar asked. Salamar thought, at least 6 months, there and back, he said, maybe 8. Ishtar's heart sank. 6 months without his father. As much as he loved Kazim and Varda and all the other servants, there was no one he loved more than his father. I must go now and see to the preparation, Salamar said, and then he was gone. Ishtar moped around the apartment for a while, thinking about his father being gone. He sat at the edge of the pool and dangled his feet in, but didn't really feel like swimming. There would be little water in his father's journey, he knew. Many caravans had passed through Amaranth, and many caravan leaders had dined at the palace. And the one topic that always came up was water. And then there was the smells, and the work, and the snakes, and the winds, and... Ishtar shuddered as he thought about it and wondered how his father could stand to even take such a trip. Oh well, he thought at last, it's going to happen and I'd better start planning for it. Each time his father left on a trip, Ishtar made plans of his own. With 6 or 8 months to work with, he was pretty sure he could cut his lesson time in half. After all, wasn't he the Prince of Persia? And now also special advisor to the king, and didn't Kazim, Varda, and all the other tutors work for him? So, shorter lessons it would be. Actually, maybe no lessons at all in mathematics. He could already add and subtract numbers, and he knew that a homer was 10 ephahs of grain, and a cubit was 1.5 lengths of a man's foot. What more was there to know? In fact, he decided, instead of lessons every day, maybe he should have them only, 2 or 3 times a week. Ishtar liked that idea best of all. And then there was bedtime. He never had time to play after astronomy lessons, and he always had to leave banquets in the middle if there was no lessons. After his father was gone, he'd make bedtime an hour or 2 later, and only after he'd eaten as much dessert as he liked. Maybe having his father gone for a while, it wouldn't be so bad after all. With lessons apparently canceled for the rest of the day, Ishtar had time to compile a long list of new rules for himself and his servants. No lessons before the 3rd bell of the day, none after the 5th bell, he decided. Swim time would be any time he wanted. He'd never have to leave the palace, and his cousins could come play as often as they liked. All through dinner and late into the evening, Ishtar kept making plans. "What's this?" Salamar's voice, booming from the darkness, startled Ishtar. "My son is actually doing lessons?" Ishtar was lying in bed and quickly covered up the wax tablet on which he was writing his new rules. Yeah, Father, I was doing much work about my lessons." Salamar sat on the end of Ishtar's bed. "Ishtar," he said seriously, "you do understand that this will be a very long and very dangerous journey." Ishtar hadn't really thought about the danger before, and now suddenly he grew frightened for his father's safety. "I have ordered a garrison of soldiers to accompany us," Salamar continued, "but even so, there are many thieves and villains who will want the treasure I have been instructed to take to the new king." "Yes, Father, I understand." Salamar hugged his son tightly. "Then you understand that Kazima Varta will have to care for you in my place." "Yes, Father," Ishtar said again. This was just like every other trip his father had taken. Kazima Varta always stayed home to watch over him. "But you may see me whenever you wish, and I will still come and settle you in bed every single night," Salamar continued. Ishtar laughed out loud. "Well, that's ridiculous. How will you put me to bed? Will you fly like a bird back to Amaranth?" Salamar looked surprised. "What do you mean, Ishtar?" I mean, how could you put me to bed when you'll be on the caravan and I'll be here in the palace?" Salamar stared at his son for a long moment. "Ishtar," he said slowly, I do not think you fully understand the situation. You are going on the journey with me." And that's the end of our reading today. Now for the follow-up conclusion. Once we allow God to have control of our lives, we might be surprised where he asks us to go. Ishtar enjoyed being honored even though he couldn't understand what he did to deserve it, but it never occurred to him that such a reward might come at a price. God wants to honor us with many gifts, more wondrous than we can imagine. Those gifts are free and a natural result of following him. But another natural result of following him is that God will give us opportunities and experiences we could never plan for ourselves. Job 37:5. God's voice thunders in marvelous ways. He does great things beyond our understanding. All in all, it's a great, grand adventure of the highest order to follow God. I'll see you tomorrow.